The winter morning air bit at Martha's cheeks as she fumbled with her keys outside her small apartment door. Another 12-hour shift at the hospital had left her exhausted, but she felt grateful to be home. Working nights as a nurse wasn't easy, especially in February when the Detroit cold seemed to seep into your bones and never leave. Martha had just turned 35 last month, and sometimes she wondered if this was how her life would always be. Work, sleep, work again. Her friends had families, husbands, children running around their houses creating happy chaos. Martha had her job, her tiny one-bedroom apartment, and a cat named Buttons who barely tolerated her presence. She pushed the key into the lock and was about to turn it when something caught her eye. There, right next to her door, sat a wicker basket. Martha's first thought was that maybe her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had left her some of those delicious cookies she made every Sunday. But as Martha looked closer, her heart nearly stopped. The basket was moving. Not just moving. There were small sounds coming from inside it. Soft whimpering sounds that made Martha's nurse instincts kick in immediately. She knelt down beside the basket, her hands shaking as she pulled back the small pink blanket covering the top. Inside was a baby, a tiny, perfect baby girl who couldn't have been more than a few days old. Martha's mouth fell open. She looked around the empty hallway, half expecting someone to jump out and tell her this was all a mistake. But the hallway was silent except for the baby's soft cries. Martha's hands moved without her thinking about it, gently lifting the infant from the basket. The baby was warm, wrapped in clean clothes, and seemed healthy despite being impossibly small. "Oh my goodness," Martha whispered, holding the baby close to her chest. "Where did you come from, little one?" That's when she noticed the piece of paper tucked into the side of the basket. With one hand supporting the baby, Martha unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had written it in a hurry or while crying. "Please give her the love I cannot. Her name is Hope. I chose you because I know you have a good heart." Martha read the words 3 times before they really sank in. Someone had left this baby specifically for her, not just at any random door, but at her door. But why? How did anyone even know where she lived? The baby, Hope, began crying louder, and Martha's training took over. She unlocked her apartment door and carried both Hope and the basket inside. Buttons, the cat, appeared from nowhere, took one look at the situation, and disappeared back into the bedroom. Martha's small living room suddenly felt different with a baby in it. She laid Hope gently on her couch, making sure pillows surrounded her so she couldn't roll off. The baby was beautiful, with dark hair and the most alert brown eyes Martha had ever seen on a newborn. Hope looked right at Martha as if she recognized her. "What am I supposed to do with you?" Martha asked softly. But she was already falling in love with this tiny person who had appeared in her life like a miracle. Martha knew she had to call someone. The police, child services, somebody. You can't just find a baby and keep her, no matter how much your heart might want to. But as she reached for her phone, Hope grabbed Martha's finger with her tiny hand, and Martha felt something she'd never experienced before. This overwhelming need to protect this child, to keep her safe, to be everything she needed. The first call Martha made was to her supervisor at the hospital. She explained the situation and asked for the next few days off. Her supervisor, Nancy, was shocked but understanding. Nancy had worked with Martha for 8 years and knew she was one of the most responsible people on their team. If Martha said she found a baby on her doorstep, then that's exactly what happened. Next, Martha called the police. Within an hour, her small apartment was full of people. 2 police officers, a social worker named Mrs. Patterson, and a paramedic who checked Hope to make sure she was healthy. Everyone was kind, but Martha could tell they were all thinking the same thing. Cases like this usually didn't end well for the babies. Mrs. Patterson explained the process to Martha while Hope slept peacefully in her arms. They would take Hope to a temporary foster home while they searched for her birth mother. If no one claimed her within a certain time period, she would be put up for adoption through the state system. "Can I visit her?" Martha asked, surprised by how desperate her voice sounded. Mrs. Patterson looked at Martha with kind eyes. "Mrs. Williams, I can see you care about this baby already. Have you ever considered becoming a foster parent?" Martha had never really thought about it. She'd always assumed she'd have children the traditional way, meet someone, get married, plan a family. But sitting there holding Hope, feeling more complete than she ever had in her life, Martha realized that maybe traditional wasn't the only way to build a family. "What would I need to do?" Martha asked. The process was complicated. Background checks, home visits, interviews, classes. It would take several weeks to get approved as a foster parent, but Mrs. Patterson could see something special happening between Martha and Hope. She made some calls and managed to arrange for Martha to be Hope's temporary, emergency foster placement while her paperwork was processed. "This is highly unusual," Mrs. Patterson told Martha. "But you're a registered nurse, you have a clean record, and honestly, this baby seems to have taken to you in a way I rarely see. Sometimes we have to trust our instincts." Over the next few weeks, Martha's life changed completely. She had to buy everything a baby needs: crib, car seat, diapers, bottles, clothes. Her small apartment became a maze of baby equipment. But Martha didn't mind. She loved every minute of it. Hope was an easy baby. She slept well, ate well, and seemed to smile at Martha from very early on. Martha's neighbors in the building fell in love with Hope too. Mrs. Rodriguez brought over homemade baby food. Mr. Johnson from downstairs fixed up an old high chair he found in the building's storage room. Even Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman from across the hall who rarely spoke to anyone, would peek out her door just to catch a glimpse of Hope when Martha carried her through the hallway. The police investigation continued, but no one came forward to claim Hope. No missing person reports matched her description. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere, meant specifically for Martha. As the weeks passed, Martha began to hope that no one would come forward. She felt guilty about it sometimes. Somewhere out there was a woman who had given birth to Hope who might be regretting her decision. But Martha couldn't help dreaming about officially adopting Hope, about being her real mother in every legal sense at night. When Hope was sleeping peacefully in the crib Martha had set up next to her bed, Martha would read that note over and over again. "I chose you because I know you have a good heart." How could a stranger know that about her? And why had they chosen her specifically? Martha kept the wicker basket in her closet, along with the pink blanket Hope had been wrapped in. Someday, when Hope was older, these would be the only connections she had to her birth mother. Martha wanted to make sure she preserved everything, just in case Hope ever wanted to know more about where she came from. But for now, Martha was focused on the present, on this beautiful baby girl who had changed her entire world in the space of one cold February morning. Hope was her daughter now in every way that mattered. And Martha was going to make sure she had the most loving home possible. 6 months had passed since Hope arrived in Martha's life, and the adoption papers were finally official. Martha cried happy tears as she signed the documents that made Hope legally her daughter. Mrs. Patterson smiled as she handed Martha the new birth certificate with both their names on it. "You two were meant for each other," Mrs. Patterson said, watching Hope babble happily in Martha's arms. "I've never seen a match work out so perfectly." Martha's life had completely changed, but she wouldn't trade it for anything. Her days now revolved around Hope's schedule: feeding times, nap times, doctor visits, and all the little moments that made being a mom so special. Martha had switched to day shifts at the hospital so she could be home with Hope at night. It meant less money, but Martha didn't care. Hope was worth any sacrifice. The apartment that had once felt too small for just Martha and Buttons now felt like the perfect size for their little family. Martha had converted her bedroom into Hope's nursery and made herself a sleeping area in the living room. She painted the walls soft yellow and hung up pictures of flowers and butterflies. Mrs. Rodriguez had given her a rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother, and Martha spent countless hours in that chair, feeding Hope bottles and singing lullabies. Hope was growing fast and developing her own little personality. She was curious about everything, always reaching for whatever Martha was holding. She loved music. Whenever Martha turned on the radio, Hope would kick her little legs and wave her arms like she was dancing. Martha started singing to her more often, making up silly songs about changing diapers and taking baths. When Hope turned 1, Martha threw a small party in their apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez brought a homemade cake. Mr. Johnson had found a vintage toy piano at a garage sale. And even Mrs. Chen came with a hand-knitted sweater for Hope. Watching Hope smash cake all over her face while surrounded by people who loved her, Martha felt like the luckiest person in the world. But being a single mom wasn't easy. Martha was constantly tired, always worried about money, and sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a child alone. There were nights when Hope was sick and wouldn't stop crying, and Martha would sit on the floor of the nursery, crying right along with her daughter because she didn't know what else to do. Martha's friends tried to help, but most of them had their own families to take care of. Her sister Linda lived 3 states away and could only visit once or twice a year. Martha's parents had passed away when she was in her 20s, so she didn't have that support system that so many other moms relied on. The financial pressure was real too. Day shift at the hospital paid less than nights, and childcare was expensive. Martha had to give up small luxuries she'd taken for granted before: eating out, buying new clothes, going to movies. Every dollar went toward Hope's needs or saving for emergencies, but Hope was such a happy baby that she made all the struggles feel worthwhile. She started walking at 11 months, which meant Martha had to baby-proof the entire apartment. Hope was into everything: pulling books off shelves, trying to eat Buttons food, fascinated by electrical outlets. Martha felt like she was constantly chasing after her, but Hope's giggles made even the most exhausting days feel magical. As Hope grew into a toddler, her personality really started to shine. She was fearless, climbing onto furniture and trying to reach things that were way too high for her. She was also incredibly affectionate, always wanting to hug Martha and give her wet kisses on the cheek. Hope's first word was "Mama," and Martha cried for an hour after she heard it. Martha started taking Hope to the library for story time, and Hope loved being around other children. She was naturally social, sharing toys and clapping along with the songs. The librarian, Mrs. Foster, became one of Hope's favorite people. She always had a special book set aside for Hope, and Hope would squeal with excitement every time she saw Mrs. Foster coming. When Hope was 2, Martha noticed something special about her daughter's relationship with music. Hope could carry a tune better than most adults, and she had an incredible memory for songs. She would hear something on the radio once and be able to hum it perfectly later. Martha started wondering if Hope might have some kind of musical talent. Martha couldn't afford music lessons, but she borrowed books about music from the library and tried to teach Hope what she could. They would sit together at the old toy piano Mr. Johnson had given them, and Martha would show Hope how to press the keys to make different sounds. Hope was fascinated by the way the notes worked together. Preschool was another financial challenge, but Martha knew Hope needed to be around other kids her age. She found a small church-based preschool that had reasonable rates and applied for a partial scholarship. Hope thrived there, making friends easily and impressing her teachers with how quickly she learned everything. Martha's co-workers at the hospital became like an extended family. They would ask about Hope constantly, and several of them started bringing in clothes their own children had outgrown. Nancy, Martha's supervisor, was especially helpful. She had raised 3 kids as a single mom and understood the challenges Martha was facing. "You're doing an amazing job," Nancy told Martha one day when she was feeling particularly overwhelmed. "That little girl is lucky to have you." But Martha always felt like she was the lucky one. Coming home to Hope's bright smile after a long day at work was the best part of every day. Hope would run to the door when she heard Martha's key in the lock, arms stretched wide for a hug, chattering excitedly about everything that had happened while Martha was at work. The bedtime routine became Martha's favorite part of the day. She would give Hope a bath, brush her teeth, and read her 3 books. Always exactly 3, because Hope had strong opinions about the bedtime routine. Then they would sit in the old rocking chair while Martha sang lullabies and Hope gradually fell asleep in her arms. Sometimes, during those quiet moments, Martha would think about the woman who had left Hope on her doorstep. She wondered if Hope's birth mother ever thought about her, wondered how she was doing, if she was happy. Martha felt grateful to that unknown woman every single day. Whatever her reasons for leaving Hope, she had given Martha the greatest gift imaginable. Martha kept the original note in a special box, along with the blanket Hope had been wrapped in and some pictures from her first few months. She planned to share Hope's story with her someday when Hope was old enough to understand. But for now, Hope was just a happy little girl who knew she was loved completely by the woman she called Mama. As Hope's 3rd birthday approached, Martha started planning another small party. Hope was old enough now to have opinions about things like cake flavors and decorations. She wanted everything to be purple, her current favorite color, and she insisted that Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter Lily should come because they were best friends forever. Looking at her daughter, so confident and happy and full of life, Martha felt proud of what they had built together. It wasn't the traditional family she had once imagined for herself, but it was perfect in its own way. They had created something beautiful out of an unexpected beginning, and Martha knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, They would face them together. Hope was growing up fast, becoming more independent every day. But she still needed her mama for the important things. Comfort when she was scared, celebration when she accomplished something new, and the security of knowing she was unconditionally loved. Martha was determined to give Hope all of that and more, for as long as Hope would let her. Hope was 13 when she first asked the question that Martha had been dreading for years. "Mom, do you think my real mother ever thinks about me?" They were sitting at the kitchen table, Hope working on her algebra homework while Martha paid bills. It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind of quiet domestic moment that had filled their lives for over a decade. But Hope's question changed everything about that ordinary moment. Martha looked up from her checkbook, trying to keep her expression calm even though her heart was racing. She had always known this conversation would happen eventually. Hope was smart, curious, and at an age where she was starting to think deeply about identity and belonging. "Honey, I am your real mother," Martha said gently, "but I know what you mean. And yes, I think she probably thinks about you every day." Hope put down her pencil and looked directly at Martha. "Do you think she regrets giving me away?" This was the part Martha had worried about most. How do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? How do you help your child process feelings about someone you've never met? "I don't think she gave you away," Martha said carefully. "I think she gave you to me. There's a difference." Martha got up and retrieved the memory box from her closet, something she hadn't opened in years. Hope watched with wide eyes as Martha placed it on the table between them. Inside were the original wicker basket, the pink blanket, and the note that had started their journey together. Hope read the note 3 times, her finger tracing the words. "She knew you? How did she know you had a good heart?" "I've wondered about that every day for 13 years, Martha admitted. "I still don't have an answer." Over the next few weeks, Hope became obsessed with her origin story. She asked Martha to tell her every detail about that February morning over and over again. She wanted to know about the police investigation, about Mrs. Patterson, about how Martha had felt in those first few moments of finding her. "Were you scared?" Hope asked one evening as they were cooking dinner together. "Terrified," Martha laughed. "I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never changed a diaper in my life." "But you figured it out," Hope said, bumping her shoulder against Martha's arm affectionately. "We figured it out together." Hope's questions evolved as she got older. She wanted to know about genetics, about medical history, about whether she had siblings somewhere in the world. Martha answered what she could and was honest about what she didn't know. "Do you ever want to find her?" Martha asked when Hope was 15, trying to keep her voice neutral. The question had been on Martha's mind for months, but she'd been afraid to ask it. Hope considered this seriously. "Sometimes I'm curious, but mostly I just wonder if she's okay, if she's happy. I don't really feel like anything is missing, you know. You've been everything I needed." Martha felt relief wash over her, but also admiration for Hope's maturity. Her daughter was thoughtful about complex emotions in a way that impressed Martha constantly. High school brought new challenges and new strengths for Hope. She had inherited Martha's caring nature and was naturally drawn to helping others. She volunteered at the animal shelter, tutored younger students in math, and organized food drives for the local homeless shelter. But it was music where Hope truly excelled. The natural talent Martha had noticed when Hope was a toddler had developed into something extraordinary. Hope could play piano by ear, had a beautiful singing voice, and seemed to understand musical theory instinctively. Her high school music teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's nephew as it turned out, was amazed by Hope's abilities. "She has something special," he told Martha during a parent conference. "Have you considered private lessons? She could really go somewhere with this." Private lessons were expensive, but Martha had been saving every extra dollar she could find for years, anticipating that Hope might need opportunities Martha couldn't provide on her own. They found a piano teacher named Mrs. Williams who worked with Hope twice a week after school. Hope blossomed under professional instruction. She learned to read complex musical pieces, began composing her own songs, and developed a particular interest in music therapy after visiting Martha at the hospital one day and seeing how music helped patients cope with pain and anxiety. "I want to help people the way you do," Hope told Martha, "but maybe I can use music to do it." Martha's heart swelled with pride. Her daughter had grown into someone who thought about making the world better. just like the caring child who had always shared her toys and worried about hurt animals. The questions about Hope's birth mother never completely went away, but they evolved into something more philosophical than urgent. Hope would sometimes wonder about genetic traits. Did she get her musical ability from her birth mother? Her height? Her stubborn streak that made her practice piano for hours when she was working on a difficult piece? Do you think I look like her? Hope asked one day, studying herself in the bathroom mirror. I think you look like yourself, Martha said. And yourself is beautiful. Hope was applying to colleges now, focused on programs that combined music and therapy. She had the grades and the talent to get into competitive schools, but the applications required essays about personal challenges and growth. Hope spent weeks working on an essay about being adopted and what it had taught her about different kinds of families. Want to hear what I wrote? She asked Martha one evening. Hope read her essay aloud, and Martha found herself crying before Hope was even halfway through. Her daughter had written about love as a choice, about how being chosen felt different from being born into a family, about how Martha's daily decision to love and support her had shaped her understanding of commitment and devotion. I don't need to find my birth mother to feel complete, Hope had written. She gave me life, but my mom gave me everything else. She taught me that families are built on love and sacrifice and showing up every single day. That's the kind of parent I want to be someday. Martha hugged Hope tightly when she finished reading. I'm so proud of you. Not just for what you wrote, but for who you've become. I had a good teacher, Hope said, hugging her back. As Hope's 18th birthday approached, Martha felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Her little girl was becoming an independent young woman ready to take on the world. The college acceptance letters had started arriving, and Hope had several excellent options to choose from. But Martha couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't complete yet. Hope seemed content with the mystery of her origins, but Martha found herself thinking more and more about the woman who had made their family possible. What had happened to her in the 25 years since that February morning? Was she happy? Did she have other children? Did she ever wonder how Hope had turned out? Sometimes Martha caught herself looking at strangers on the street, wondering if she was seeing Hope's birth mother without knowing it. Detroit wasn't that big a city. It was possible they had crossed paths over the years. In the grocery store, at Hope's school events, maybe even at the hospital where Martha worked. Mom, you're being weird again, Hope teased one evening, catching Martha staring out the window with a distant expression. Just thinking, Martha said. About what? Martha considered telling Hope about her growing curiosity, but decided against it. Hope was focused on her future, on college and career plans and becoming the person she wanted to be. If Hope wanted to explore her past, that was her choice to make. Martha's job was to support whatever decision Hope made, not to push her in any particular direction. But late at night, when Hope was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Martha would sometimes take out that old note and read it again. I chose you because I know you have a good heart. The mystery of those words had never been solved, and Martha was beginning to think that maybe it was time to try harder to find some answers. Hope was 25 now, and Martha couldn't believe how fast the years had flown by. Her daughter had graduated from college with honors, earned her certification in music therapy, and was working at Detroit Children's Hospital, the same hospital where Martha had spent most of her career, though Martha had recently retired. Watching Hope work with young patients, using music to help them cope with illness and pain, filled Martha with more pride than she could express. Hope had found her calling, and she was making a real difference in people's lives every single day. Mrs. Williams, your daughter is incredible, Dr. Peterson told Martha during one of her visits to the hospital. The kids light up when they see her coming. She has this natural gift for connecting with them. Martha smiled, watching through the window as Hope played guitar for a group of children in the cancer ward. Hope was singing a song she'd written herself, something upbeat and silly that had all the kids laughing and clapping along. She gets that from her mother, Dr. Peterson continued, not realizing the complexity of that statement. Hope had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who looked remarkably like Martha, despite sharing no DNA with her. They had the same way of tilting their heads when they were thinking, the same laugh, even similar handwriting. People often commented on how much Hope resembled Martha, and neither of them ever corrected the assumption. Martha had moved to a larger apartment when Hope started college, giving them each their own space while still living together. Hope could have afforded her own place on her salary, but she enjoyed living with Martha. They had become not just mother and daughter, but best friends who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Besides, Hope often joked, someone has to make sure you don't become one of those lonely cat ladies now that you're retired. They had adopted a second cat, a orange tabby named Sunny, to keep Buttons company. The apartment was full of music now. Hope had a real piano, several guitars, and various other instruments she used for work and for her own compositions. Hope had dated a few people over the years, but nothing too serious until she met David, a physical therapist who worked at the same hospital. Martha liked David immediately. He was kind, funny, and clearly adored Hope. More importantly, he understood and respected the close relationship between Hope and Martha. "I've never seen a mother and daughter who are such good friends," David told Martha one evening when he was over for dinner. "It's really special." David had been raised by his grandparents after his parents died in a car accident when he was 8. He understood that families came in all different forms, and he never questioned the bond between Hope and Martha. Hope and David had been together for 2 years now, and Martha could tell they were getting serious. They talked about the future together: marriage, children, buying a house. Martha was happy for Hope, but she also felt a little melancholy about the changes that lay ahead. "You know I'm not going anywhere, right?" Hope said one evening, apparently reading Martha's mind. "Even when David and I get married, even when we have kids, you're still going to be the most important person in my life." "I just want you to be happy," Martha said, "and to build the life you want." "I want a life that includes you," Hope replied firmly. "David knows that. Any man I married would have to understand that you and I are a package deal." As Hope and David's relationship grew more serious, they started talking about having children. That's when Hope brought up something that had been on her mind. "Mom, I've been thinking about doing one of those DNA tests," Hope said one Saturday morning as they were having coffee together. "Not to find my birth mother necessarily, but to get medical information. If David and I have kids, I'd like to know if there's anything genetic I should be aware of." Martha felt her stomach tighten, but she tried to keep her voice calm. "That makes sense. It's good to have that information. Would it bother you if I found out more about my biological family?" Martha considered the question honestly. Over the years, she had sometimes feared that Hope would want to find her birth mother, and that it might change their relationship somehow. But looking at Hope now, this wonderful, successful, happy young woman, Martha realized that nothing could diminish what they had built together. "Honey, you could discover you have 10 siblings and 3 sets of grandparents, and it wouldn't change the fact that you're my daughter and I'm your mother. Nothing could ever change that." Hope reached across the table and squeezed Martha's hand. "I love you, Mom. I love you too." Hope ordered the DNA test kit that week. Martha felt nervous about it, but she tried not to let Hope see her anxiety. Whatever happened, they would deal with it together, just like they always had. The results took 6 weeks to come back. Hope opened them on a Thursday evening in March with Martha sitting beside her on the couch and David on her other side. "Okay," Hope said, taking a deep breath. "Here we go." The basic genetic information was straightforward. Hope was healthy with no significant genetic risk factors for major diseases. But there was something else. The test had found potential family matches. "It says I have a possible half-sister," Hope said, staring at the screen. "Her name is Grace, and she's 32 years old." Martha felt her heart start racing. After all these years, Hope might finally get answers about her origins. Hope stared at the information for a long time before speaking again. "Should I contact her?" "That's your decision to make," Martha said. "But if you want to, I'll support you completely." David nodded in agreement. "Whatever you decide, we're here for you." Hope was quiet for the rest of the evening, clearly processing this unexpected development. Martha gave her space to think, but she couldn't help feeling anxious about what this might mean for their family. The next morning, Hope made her decision. "I'm going to message her. I need to know." Hope sent a simple message through the DNA website, introducing herself and explaining that they appeared to be related. She included her phone number and asked if Grace would be willing to talk. Grace responded within 2 hours. "Can you call me tonight?" was all the message said, along with a phone number. That evening, Martha sat with Hope as she dialed Grace's number. Martha could only hear one side of the conversation. but she watched Hope's expressions change from nervous to surprised to emotional. "Yes, I was adopted," Hope was saying. "I was left on my mother's doorstep when I was a baby. Yes, in Detroit, February 1999. What do you mean you've been looking for me?" The conversation lasted over an hour. When Hope finally hung up, she was crying. "Mom," Hope said, turning to Martha with tears streaming down her face. "Grace knows everything. She knows about my birth mother, about why I was left on your doorstep, about everything. And Mom, there's something you need to know." Martha felt her world starting to shift. After 26 years of wondering, they were finally going to get answers. But looking at Hope's expression, Martha wasn't sure she was ready to hear what those answers might be. Grace arrived at Martha's apartment the following Saturday morning, carrying flowers and looking as nervous as Martha felt. Hope had described her half-sister over the phone, but seeing Grace in person was startling. She had Hope's eyes and smile, making their family connection immediately obvious. "Mrs. Williams," Grace said, her voice shaky with emotion, "I've wanted to meet you for so long." They sat in Martha's living room, Martha, Hope, David, and Grace, while Grace began to tell them a story that was more incredible than anything Martha could have imagined. "Our mother's name was Rebecca," Grace began. "Rebecca Chen. She was Chinese-American, 22 years old when Hope was born. She was in a really bad situation back then, involved with a man who was dangerous, living in poverty, struggling with addiction." Martha reached for Hope's hand as Grace continued. "But here's the thing," Grace said, looking directly at Martha. "She didn't choose your doorstep randomly. She knew exactly who you were." Martha felt her breath catch. "What do you mean?" Grace pulled out an old photograph and handed it to Martha. It showed a young Asian woman lying in a hospital bed holding a baby. In the background, partially visible, was a nurse in scrubs. "That's you," Grace said softly. "That's you with Rebecca and her first baby, my older brother Tommy, who died when he was 3 days old." Martha stared at the photograph, and suddenly the memory came flooding back. 7 years before Hope was born, Martha had worked in the maternity ward for 6 months. She remembered Rebecca now, a young woman who had come in alone, frightened, and had lost her baby to a rare heart condition. "She talked about you for years after that," Grace continued. "She said you were the only person who was kind to her during the worst time of her life. You stayed with her when the baby died. You held her while she cried. You helped arrange the funeral when she couldn't afford one." Martha's eyes filled with tears as the memories came back. She had bent hospital rules to help Rebecca, using her own money to pay for things Rebecca needed, spending her breaks sitting with her when she had no visitors. "I remember her," Martha whispered. "She was so young, so scared. I felt terrible for her." "She never forgot your kindness," Grace said. "After Tommy died, Rebecca tried to get her life together, but she kept falling back into bad situations. When she got pregnant with Hope, she was clean but barely surviving. The baby's father was violent, and Rebecca knew she couldn't provide the life she wanted for Hope." Grace paused, wiping her own eyes before continuing. "So she started following you. She learned where you lived, watched you from a distance. She saw how you treated people, how you cared for your neighbors, how you lived your life. She spent weeks making sure you were the person she remembered from the hospital." Hope was crying now, too. "She researched Mom?" "For over a month," Grace nodded. "She would sit in the parking lot at your apartment building and watch you come and go. She saw you help Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries, saw you pet stray cats, saw you give money to homeless people. She told me she knew you were the only person she trusted to raise her baby." Martha felt overwhelmed by this revelation. "But why didn't she just contact me directly?" "Ask me?" Grace's expression grew sad. "Because she was ashamed. She thought you might remember her as the drug addict who lost her baby, not as someone worthy of asking such a huge favor. And she was afraid that if she asked directly, you might say no out of obligation to help her, even if you didn't really want a baby. So she left Hope on my doorstep with that note," Martha said, understanding finally dawning. "She wanted to give you the choice without putting pressure on you," Grace explained. "She figured if you were the person she believed you to be, you'd take care of Hope. And if for some reason you couldn't, you'd make sure Hope got to someone who could." David, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "That's incredible. She basically conducted a month-long character study. What happened to her after that?" Hope asked quietly. Grace's expression grew more serious. She moved to California. Got clean for good this time. Met my father when I was 2. He's the only dad I ever knew. She told him about Hope and he supported her decision. They got married, and Rebecca went to community college, became a medical assistant. They had me and then my younger brother Jake. She had more children. Hope asked. 3 of us total, counting you, Grace said. But Hope, you were always the one she thought about most. She said giving you up was the hardest thing she ever did, but also the best decision she ever made because she knew you were going to have an amazing life. Martha felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude, sadness, and something she couldn't quite identify. Does she want to meet Hope? Grace's expression changed, and Martha knew immediately that there was more difficult news coming. She's sick, Grace said quietly. She has pancreatic cancer. The doctors say she has maybe a few months left. The room fell silent except for the sound of Hope's quiet sobs. She wants to meet both of you, Grace continued. But only if you want to. She made me promise not to push. She says she gave up the right to ask anything of Hope a long time ago, and she's grateful for every day that Hope has been happy and loved. Hope looked at Martha through her tears. Mom, what do you think? Martha thought about the young woman from 26 years ago who had made such an impossible decision out of love for her child. She thought about the woman who had spent weeks making sure Hope would go to the right person. She thought about the mother who had carried the weight of that decision for over 2 decades. I think, Martha said slowly, that I'd like to thank her for trusting me with the most precious thing in her life and for making me a mother. 2 weeks later, they all flew to San Francisco. Rebecca was in hospice care, but she was alert and eager to meet them. When Martha and Hope walked into her room, Rebecca immediately started crying. Hope, she whispered, reaching out her hand. You're so beautiful. You look just like I imagined you would. Hope took her birth mother's hand gently. Thank you, she said simply, for choosing my mom, for making sure I had the best life possible. Rebecca turned to Martha, her eyes full of gratitude. I knew, she said, from the moment I saw you with my son Tommy, I knew you had the biggest heart in the world. Thank you for loving her. Thank you for being everything I couldn't be. Martha took Rebecca's other hand. Thank you for trusting me. She's been the greatest joy of my life. They spent 3 days together, sharing stories, looking at photo albums, and filling in all the missing pieces of Hope's history. Rebecca got to hear about Hope's childhood, her education, her career, her relationship with David. She got to see videos of Hope playing piano and working with children at the hospital. You became exactly who I hoped you would become, Rebecca told Hope on their last day together. Caring, talented, strong. You're making the world better just like your mom taught you to do. Rebecca died 6 weeks later, peacefully, surrounded by Grace, Jake, and their father. Martha and Hope flew back to California for the funeral. It was the first time Hope had ever been to a service for a family member, and Martha held her tight as they said goodbye to the woman who had brought them together. In her will, Rebecca had left Hope a box of letters, one for every birthday Hope had celebrated starting from her first birthday. Rebecca had written them over the years, imagining what Hope might be doing, expressing her hopes and dreams for her daughter's future. I want you to know, Rebecca had written in the letter for Hope's 25th birthday, that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you and wished you happiness. I hope your mother knows how grateful I am to her for giving you all the love I couldn't. You both made my impossible choice worthwhile. Standing in Martha's kitchen months later, Hope finished reading the last letter. Martha watched her daughter, this amazing young woman who had been shaped by not one but 2 mothers who loved her deeply. I want to frame this, Hope said, holding up a photo Rebecca had included with the letters. It showed Martha holding baby Hope in the hospital room the day after she was found, both of them looking peaceful and content. We were meant to be a family, Hope continued. Rebecca saw that before either of us did. She brought us together because she knew we needed each other. Martha looked at the photo and smiled. In it, she could see the beginning of everything: the love, the challenges, the joy, and the bond that had sustained them for 26 years. She gave me the greatest gift imaginable, Martha said. She gave me you. Hope hugged Martha tightly, and she gave me the most amazing mother in the world. As they stood there in their kitchen, surrounded by photos spanning more than 2 decades of birthdays, graduations, holidays, and ordinary moments that made up a life together, Martha reflected on the incredible journey that had started with a basket on her doorstep. Rebecca had been right about one thing. They were meant to be together. And now, finally understanding the full story of how they became a family, Martha felt more grateful than ever for the scared young woman who had loved Hope enough to give her away, and wise enough to know exactly where she belonged.